Hello everybody, welcome to StraightA. Dawson here, back with another video, and this week I'm all alone, boys and girls and ladies and gentlemen. I am all alone with the power rankings this week, week 9, NFL week 9 power rankings. We're almost at the halfway point of the season, and the boys decided to go ahead and take their bye weeks out, so only Trayson will be around, and really with the time that we have, we only have enough time to really do one video together, so we're probably going to do predictions. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of do our solo power rankings, and this will be that kind of video for the week. So unfortunately, like I said, everybody's unavailable, even with the new additions of, Taylor and Braden now coming into the crew. It's just kind of us for now. But that's beside the point. They're going to be back with some more videos, so we're going to show out this week, kind of get out some good videos, and next week we'll have a special power rankings video where all of us, or at least all the available us, will all come together and vote on how the power rankings should be arranged going into the second half of the season. At this point, this power rankings was initially started based on how well the teams did last year. So I kind of took where they made it into the playoffs, or took what their standings were, and roughly placed them with some minor adjustments based on their off season. But the adjustments weren't very large. The Giants started at 8th. Because they made it to the divisional round, I believe. Yeah, the divisional round. So there was 8 teams left. That's kind of how they landed up, because I was like, well, I can't say a divisional team is worse than a wild card team at this point. So, that's how I lodged it, and maybe I'll change that up for next year when I do the power rankings. But this year, I kind of adjusted from there. So the Giants fell from 8 and fell all the way down to 20 so far. Meanwhile, some people do think they should be like a bottom 5 team, which I'll get into that and the logic behind it. But I can see where the flaws are starting to kind of crack open for some of these teams, because I'm like very firm on where they are now. But if they're a really good team that kind of fell from heights, then maybe some adjustments need to be needed. So I decided that I think the best way to do it is taking the whole StraightA gang and saying, hey, we're all going to come to consensus 1 through 32 of what we can kind of call the top, the ordering, and then readjust it, show the audience, you guys, the adjustments on it. So wherever we move the Giants, if we move them at 32, it'll show a -12 based on the from 20 to 32. Next week, so we'll do like a tier list ranking video, along with showcasing the changes that we probably won't see in real time, but you'll see with me, or see this is a visual about the adjustments that were made that week and the official halfway point power ranks. Because next week will be kind of cool, because it is the halfway through the season. But either way, I'm going to logic through and tell you guys why my teams are in the order they are, and kind of just tell you like my logic behind it. And I am going to pull up my my original tier list maker, because as y'all know, I do use a tier list to kind of adjust it over time, because it's really hard to edit this on Canva. I use Canva to kind of move them around and make this visual for the audience, you guys, I should say. Meanwhile, I use a tier list to kind of easily kind of feel out where they fall and where they rank and all that. Maybe next year I'll kind of do more of a proper adjustment, but this year I'm filling it out, so we're rolling with it. Beside the point, number 32 is the Chicago Bears. I mean, obviously, Chicago Bears have been really struggling all season, even with Justin Fields in tow. Really wasn't doing a whole lot. They had a couple good games. DJ Moore broke out. Justin Fields had a good game or two, you could argue, but he really has just failed to do much of anything up to this point. Oh, excuse me. And currently they are sitting at a 2-6 record. Just want to check that the Arizona Cardinals are still the only one-win team, which they are. I mean, the Bears have just been, well, they've gotten their wins in. They got a couple wins. I don't see too many more in their future, especially Justin Fields out. And, I just don't see much hope in their team evolving much past 2-6. I can see a 3-14 type record, 4-13 maybe. But the Bears are struggling a lot, and they deserve kind of the end there. They made a trade recently, and we'll see. It was using one of their second-round picks, which should be a high second-round pick. So I don't know if that was a smart move by the Bears, because I don't know if this is the win-it season for them, but they obviously still want to stay in it somewhat. The division's kind of tough, especially on the upper half with the Lions leading it. But the Bears, either way, still sit at 32 just because of how much they struggle. And at 31, the Cardinals are right there with them. They're pretty much right there with each other. The only reason I'm giving the Cardinals above the Bears is that the Cardinals have competed well against harder teams. Now, the 31 spot, I don't see them holding very long, because they'll go to 32 here soon. Due to the trade of Joshua Dobbs, I think they'll struggle a lot more, and I don't think they're going to bring Kyler in the season, or at least not until near the end of the season, where they can kind of see on his health and see where his skills are. But they're not going to do it to win anything. They're going to do it to basically tank. And I can see them winning one more game, but I mean, they're going to They're going to struggle a lot more, I think, now with Joshua Dobbs out, because I think Joshua Dobbs was an underrated talent, and we'll see how the Vikings do with him. But the Cardinals, only slight adjustment just based on this last week. Bears still pretty much there, but they're pretty much right neck and neck with each other. Next up, we have one of my most controversial takes by the guys, and I think the Texans are a bottom 5 team. Oh my God, I'm gonna have to take a drink, man. I guess Ben and all of them, I can feel their hate towards me already. Nonetheless, I do have the Texans now at the bottom 3 spot. And I mean, the Panthers' loss is a big loss. I mean, a -3 drop, by the way. I mean, isn't a significant drop, but they did drop to the only winless team, and they didn't play very well. And honestly, C.J. Stroud and the Texans' offense hasn't played well in a couple weeks. Now, granted, they had a bye week. Their defense hasn't played amazingly well recently. They're still a filling out process team. While we saw those sparks of what they can do, people are getting hyped on them. And Ben got me hyped on them very much so. I'm not going to deny that I am very high on the Texans. I'm not high on the Texans right now because when the Panthers and Texans are very similar in this way. They're a young team with so much potential, but their potential is not being released yet because they have good schemes and they're playing good teams, but they're also not showcasing a whole lot outside of a couple flashes here and there. They need to get more consistent, and then their power rankings are going to go up and more. What this power rankings is supposed to show is the potential, or not the potential of these teams. The potential of these teams is a factor of it, but it's showing where currently they are kind of feeling the moment. It's almost like a momentum meter, if that makes sense. But it's not really momentum. It's just showcasing where these teams are kind of gradually growing and falling. Because I'm not going to drop a team 5 for 1 loss. I mean, depending on the week. I mean, if they got destroyed, yeah, sure. I've done it with the Giants. I think I did it with the Cowboys. I think with the -4 or something. It's just, you got to readjust based on like how these teams are gradually doing. And the Texans were one of the worst teams last year. They showed some sparks. They played some bad teams, or mediocre teams at the very least. Teams that they should beat in a normal season. But so far, I think I've been more underwhelmed with their progress. And I think I want to see, I shouldn't say progress, but underwhelmed with their performance, really impressed with their progress. And I think we can see the Texans be one of these best teams in the coming seasons. But, I mean, expectations were low for them. I'm sure people can say, oh, they're a top 20 team. I mean, sure, I can be argued with in terms of 25, but I can't see them be argued a top 20 team. They're just not ready for that yet. The record shows that they are doing very good. Yes, 100%. They are eking out some of these victories, but they really haven't done a dominant win. They haven't done a consistently good one where I don't feel like they fell into a win. Sure, they got beat by the Panthers, and that's a pretty big, diss on them as well. But beside the point, I think the Texans need to kind of be felt out more before we just give them a bunch of roses. Especially competing with, that top 16 teams, like top 15 probably more so than top 16, but top 16 even, top 18 even, top 20 even. I don't see them in that level of those teams. And even top 24, sure, they beat the Saints, I believe, earlier this season, but like the Saints have been looking really, really good again, and I would probably put my money on the Saints winning most times out of 10, So, beside the point, got to move on. The Raiders, they look trash. The only reason they're not above the Texans is because I believe the Texans, just, when you have a winless team beat you, it's hard to, say that. I don't think the Texans look worse than the Raiders this week, or as bad as the Raiders. I think they both look pretty evenly bad, but the Raiders played also a better team, so I gave them adjustment there. Broncos, when you beat the Chiefs, even if it's a division rival, you got to celebrate a little bit, so +2 seemed pretty reasonable because I think the Cardinals and Bears are very comfortably below them, but I think the Raiders and Texans now are now right neck and neck with them. And just for context, on a tier list, I have the Bears and Cardinals together, and now I have the Texans all the way through the Colts together. And basically, what my tier list basically means is that there's a gap somewhere in between there, in between those teams. Because next up, I got the Panthers, and I think the Panthers, I'm finally putting a +2 on because they beat the Texans. But also, I think they're just got more momentum than a lot of teams around them. I think the Panthers can move up a lot and little, just based on the performances, because they looked really good. They didn't look amazing, but they looked like a promising team, and they actually got within range to finally win. And a big win deserves a big push. Now, granted, the big push did go over some other people. I did bait on the Broncos and Panthers, but I didn't want to reward the Broncos more and the Panthers less. So I decided on like an equal measure up. I don't think much ground was gained anyway. And then you got the Colts, who I'm wishy-washy on right now. I don't know. With Gardner Minshew, he's got to show me more. The defense got to be better. And overall, the team scheme has to be more consistent with their wins. I believe they're 3-5, if I'm standing correctly for here. Yeah, they're 3-5. They've gotten the wins. They've gotten a lot of losses, and they're doing those wins against a lot of teams that They need some wins against some teams that we don't expect them to win, and for them to gain momentum. Their run game is getting better. Their defense, especially on the rushing side of things, is looking better. Secondary's being a little bit weak, and Gardner Minshew is just suitable right now. If they really want to gain momentum, they got to start climbing these ranks a little bit better and being more consistent. Simple and to the point. I'm willing to go a little bit higher with them, but they're a team I'm hesitant on right now. With +2, they did do very well this week, so I'm going to give them that +2 upwards, but beside the point. Going up into the next tier where I think there's a little bit of gap, I think the Falcons are falling. I'm getting less and less confident with the Falcons on offense. Their defense is still showing that they can be consistent. I mean, it's just whether it's a slightly above average or slightly below average a week for them. I'm not seeing a superb week, and I'm not seeing a very bad week from their defense at least. Falcons on offense, though, are miserable sometimes. They're either very good or very bad. And the run game is starting to kind of being halted a little bit. Sure, not goal line, but like more red zone running game is getting better, but I mean when they can't score touchdowns with the round, they try throwing, and they literally end up throwing the game a lot of times. And Falcons they didn't look bad against the Titans. It's just that a lot of teams around them also look better than them. And simple to the point, I'm starting to fall a little bit with them. I think they're starting to lose momentum. They're still 4-4, which is why I decided to be one more week on them. I think the one more week shows me whether they are a real team or just kind of a team that had momentum and then kind of lost it. Simple to the point. Patriots. I'm finally being a little bit harder on the Patriots. 2-6. I mean, when you lose, even against Dolphins, they lost not very greatly against Dolphins by 2 scores, 14 points, I believe. They deserve a -3. I'm getting a lot less high on them because their defense is starting to lack a lot more. They're showing some potential. Obviously, they got a huge win last week, but they're consistently showcasing not good talent. Their offense is just average. That's pretty much their ceiling. There is an average offense. Their run game is almost non-existent. Mac Jones is suitable at best, and they have no receiver that's going to help them consistently get that. And simple to the point, Patriots starting to fall for me, while I think a lot of teams, especially the 3 teams above them who did pass them, are looking really, really good in their own regard. Moving to one of those teams, Titans. I think with Will Levis and the momentum he's carrying, DeAndre Hopkins looking so good, and the run game being so good, and their defense being suitable, the Titans are finally starting to gain momentum. They've been sorely lacking, and I finally pushed them into that next tier. Again, the Falcons tier. Falcons to about Saints tier is next in this regard, where there's gaps in between. The Titans are looking really good and really, really promising. And I think they keep that up on offense and keep their defense to a suitable level. Will Levis could lead them to a nice little top 20 team. I'm not going to lie. They can gradually push. It's going to take a couple wins to do that. But the Titans are capable of doing it. And especially with good performances, they can really do it. Commanders, on the other hand, I'm really always iffy about moving the Commanders up. And really, they moved up just because, I mean, when you compete that well against even a division rival, even the Eagles, especially in the Eagles, I should say, you push the Eagles to their limits. You always do. Got to give them a +2. I mean, it's just kind of how the cookie crumbles in that regard. I thought they looked better than the Falcons and decided to put them above the Falcons and the Patriots. So kind of ended up, them getting +2 more than anything. And I didn't want to put Titans above them because you could almost see that it's quite equal in terms of the Commanders played really well against a good team and Titans beat a mediocre team by just a little bit. So, you can take that as you will. I'm again, any tier of these tiers, I'm kind of willing to work a lot with. So take that as you will. And Saints, I mean, they look really good. Honestly, I'm really tempted to put them in this next tier. I'm almost a little hesitant in the top 20. I almost put the Saints above the Giants here and move the Giants down. I decided to hold off one more week. As you guys know, I'm a Giants believer, even though I'm not the biggest fan of the Giants. If you saw one of my videos way back now, I say way back, but like probably a few weeks now, about my favorite teams. I'm not like a big Giants lover, but their team has so much potential, and I don't know what's wrong with them. So beside that point, the Saints again have looked really good, just inconsistent, but I think they're starting to find a little bit of consistency, and that keeps me from moving them to a top 20 team. Beside the point, number 20, of course, is the Giants. This now starts next tier of Giants, Rams, Packers. I think these three teams are very suitable with each other right now. Giants are not a bottom 10 team right now, and well, okay, maybe about bottom 10. I don't see them 23 through 32 is what I should say, more so. I can see an argument made for the Saints and Commanders and maybe even the Titans. And I'm kind of willing to go there. That's going to be the ground I'm willing to give up on. But when I look at the Giants, Patriots, Giants, Falcons, Giants, Colts, Giants, Panthers, Giants, Broncos, etc., I see a team in the Giants which they should be able to show out. they should be able to actually show out against one of those teams. And granted, I thought they were going to show out against the Jets. And in fact, they actually shown way worse. And if you know anything about me so far in the power rankings, there's some big gaps within like 16, that middling part. So they've fallen a lot more than the numbers have given them credit for. But I'm not willing to let go of their momentum from last year until I see another loss. I've said that almost every week. I'm going to keep on dropping them, but I don't see them in that Broncos Raiders tier. I genuinely believe that the Giants could beat Colts down easily, or at least suitably, and I believe they could compete with the Falcons. I believe they would probably, have a game with the Commanders, have a game with the Saints, have a game with the Patriots, and who knows between the Titans and Giants who would win there. I'll be honest with you. Those two teams feel like a team that would be a very fun team to watch against. But Giants are definitely falling a lot for me, and I don't want to say that I think they're the best team around. I don't think they're the best team by far. Obviously, they're number 20, but I see them to being a lot better than people are giving credit for. They're overusing Saquon. They're going to end up hurting themselves way more if Saquon gets hurt, and they need to actually be able to throw the ball. Simple to the point, they didn't throw the ball any this week, and like I said, they're pretty much on the verge of going down in their tier. I had them in a tier above this, and then I brought them to the tier below them all the way to the bottom of it. They're pretty much one little, I don't care what happens next week, if they either show really bad stats one way or the other, or a loss, then I don't know, they're going to move down. That's simple and to the point what's going to happen. Moving up, though, in a positive light is the Rams and Packers. Rams showed out, like, their game was weird. I don't know. They looked kind of good against a really good team who beat them by 23. There's a lot of teams around them I'm willing to bet on the Rams over. And the Packers are almost one of them, but the Packers looked at least decently good in their own regards. And again, teams around them looked really bad. And I think the Packers are gradually getting better. They kind of have almost a roller coaster. I don't think the Packers have been great. Obviously, they lost 24-10, I believe, against the Vikings, but they are 2-5, I believe, and it really does hurt. It does hurt me a little bit to put them +2. But when you look at the Rams who got destroyed, I couldn't put the Rams above them. I couldn't put the Giants above them, obviously, and the Steelers have looked really good. So I kept them above them, but the Packers are in a weird spot where I'm not willing to move them down. They're kind of in the Giants here. Almost honestly, this whole tier of Giants, Rams, Giants, it's kind of just me being not sure of the teams. I feel like all these three teams are teams that are good in their own rights, but they have to do something. They have to do something to prove it to me. And the Packers, Rams are more so on the up tier than they are down tier, because I believe in the Packers in a regard. I think Jordan Love has some potential there, but their team around them is either not believing them, the coaching scheme's not working with them, or something. Something's not necessarily wrong with Jordan Love, it doesn't seem like, and I don't know what it is. And maybe it's a team scheme, maybe it's the process around them. I'm not exactly sure. The Rams, I'm also very, very positive on. I think I see a lot of good. I think their defense is still need a lot of work, and I think their offensive line is really, really bad. Simple to the point, they have weapons on the secondary, and they have, well, I shouldn't say secondary. They have some good, suitable weapons on the, the wide receivers and running backs, and they have a suitable secondary. Simple to the point, that's what they got. And other than that, the Rams don't have much of else. They have Aaron Donald, sure. But I think I can see their offense really pushing them into a tier above them if they just continuously win. But they obviously are a 3-5 record. Yeah, 3-5 record. They face good teams, but they have to be able to compete against them. Simple to the point. This is kind of the weird tier of I don't know what to do with you. You seem kind of weird. Now we're pretty much in the tier that I'm very excited about. A lot of teams consistently. Steelers right now are 5-4 or 4-5 or sorry 5-3 something like that. 4-3. There we go. So they're still in the positive. I think they are a team that just plays very, very well consistently. And I don't think keeping them at 17 was very controversial. And I probably should kind of use reference for the games they played. I mean, they played fine against the Jaguars, but they didn't really compete as well as I hoped to. But again, I don't see them going down anymore because they're just playing consistently fine, while other teams below them are playing very inconsistently fine. So it's really hard to gauge where the Steelers should land. And kind of, again, that's why they're bottom of this next tier. They're kind of bottom of my next thought process. And honestly, I labeled this one a small gap. Because Steelers, Jets, I don't know what to do with. The Steelers have done consistently well, but don't tend to, I don't know. They tend to win. They tend to win games, and they tend to not to do well in those games. But then they lose games, and they look decent. And this game maybe is a little bit of an exception to that one, because they're kind of in the middle ground in this game. This game didn't impress me one way or the other too much. But it's just very strange to see the Steelers. So they're kind of in a small gap where I think they can go down to the Packers tier, but they can also go up to the Browns tier. Meanwhile, Jets, I don't know what to say about them. They just don't have an offense. Their defense carries them week in, week out. Jets sometimes have breathing of life. I wanted to move them down to be honest, to the Giants here. But since they won, I decided to kind of be more hesitant when it comes to that. So, whatever. I kept the Jets where they are. Browns, losing the way they did and their offense kind of struggling really hard without Deshaun Watson is just really miserable to see. I gave them a slight bump down at -1, even against the Seahawks here. I still think the Browns have a lot of potential in them. I think they're right there with the Bucs pretty much in terms of like, hey, I still believe in you to be able to do something more to kind of get in that wild card, get into that playoff spot, but their defense is going to do a lot of the carrying. At this point, I could see the Browns dropping a little bit more. But right now, I'm okay with them in the 15th spot because Seahawks are a tough team to play to. So we'll see how they do in this following week. Meanwhile, then you got the Bucs, who are right there with them pretty much, got pretty comparable teams in their own right. I think the Bucs have fallen off a lot of their momentum initially. And, of course, they lost in a decent game from the Bills. Kind of looking back at it, it's not the most amazing game they had, but it was a fine game. They're 3-4. They fell from the top of the rankings to now, near the bottom. But I still think I see a lot of potential in the Bucs to do well. They just got actually get wins over good teams. They really haven't done that. They got wins they should have, and they now have lost a game or two that they shouldn't have. They lost 2 games, which I don't think necessarily were all their fault. Like the Bills, I don't think totally outlandish. I think this is an expected result. 18-24 is a good margin. If anything, it probably overexceeded some people's expectations. But the Bucs are a suitable team who I don't think have lost the momentum yet, but they're kind of keeping an eye out in terms of like, okay, well, we'll see what the Bucs can actually do. And that's kind of appropriate because honestly, when you get to 13, 12 and up, I feel like are really solid teams. 13 and down start getting to the teams where I think are very easy first round outs unless they eke out a nice little victory, maybe like the Giants did last year. Meanwhile, I think the Vikings, again, I never like to judge a team before I see their full potential in their new state. Obviously, they lost Kirk Cousins. Justin Jefferson's out for a few more weeks, if not several weeks. I forgot exactly his return date. He's supposed to come back eventually, though. Kirk Cousins, meanwhile, losing Kirk Cousins hurts a lot, and I think we're going to see that. And I'm not willing to move them because of that. Obviously, they won, and I'm nervous about the injury, but they don't deserve to move down or up because of that, because I want to see how now Joshua Dobbs plays. And I think it's going to be a downgrade, and people need to get that through their head that this will be a downgrade. But I don't think it's going to be as bad of a downgrade as people think it is. I think some people think it's catastrophic, and I think this is just more so really, 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 really unfortunate. Is really just the best way to say it. It's very unfortunate, and they're going to make do. They now don't have their starting quarterback, and they don't have their starting wide receiver. And honestly, their run game hasn't been great. Their defense has been suitable at best. What's carrying them all the way here? And I think they just have to learn to be more consistent. With Kirk Cousins, they learned that they can use Jordan Addison and KJ Osborne together. Now with Joshua Dobbs, they have to learn how to adapt with that, and he has more of a scrambler-like persona, so maybe with that, they can combine that with some nice yardage on the ground while also getting some reception yards to Jordan Addison and KJ Osborne when needed, and TJ Hawkinson for those nice chuck down passes. I think they have a nice offense around them. They just have to be able to use it. And obviously the 13th spot, I think, is very appropriate right now and keep stabilizing with them. Meanwhile, the Chargers, I forgot even what the Chargers did this week. Oh yeah, they beat the Bears. Sure, they beat the Bears. I've been very impressed with the Chargers in terms of their play style, but I mean they're still 3-4, I believe. I gotta look and make sure I'm not forgetting. Yeah, 3-4. I mean they're still easily. I don't want to say that. Yeah, they're with the Broncos and Raiders. They're all struggling in their own right, but Chargers obviously have the most potential as long as their coaching can actually do something. Their team, I could see easily being into the outside the top, 15, 20, but if they didn't have the players they do, but they do. So they just got to consistently play well and stay up in that upper region. I think they have showcased in games they can really, really compete. Meanwhile, the Lions, I think, are a good 11th spot. I mean, after getting a really bad loss to the Ravens, they kind of recovered a little bit in their win this week. Sorry. In their win this week against the Raiders. Not a very good team, and honestly, again, I was more impressed with teams around them in terms of their play style. But again, they're still in that fringe top 10 team, and I'm not gonna count them out. They're 6-2. I just wish they've had, they need to win some of these other big games they have coming up, rather than just the Chiefs game. We can't just bank on the Chiefs game completely, because as much credit as I have given them, I give them a lot of credit. It was a weaker Chiefs team. It was the start of the season. Almost a lot of things can go wrong. And I want to give them that credit that they are a top 10 team, but they're maybe in that fringe top 10 team area instead. Because meanwhile, the Bengals have dropped. They were dropped really considerably. They kind of lost a lot of that, and they've lost the trust meter. Almost this power rank is almost a trust meter in these teams, and the Bengals are starting to gain that trust back, and they're starting to gain that momentum back, and they're winning more and more. And obviously, I'm being hesitant because I think they had to jump a big gap to come back a little bit, and I think I was not willing to put them over the Seahawks or the Dolphins or Jaguars just yet, but I think they're pretty much in line with the Seahawks, Dolphins, Jaguars. And I should clarify that of course, the Browns and Buccaneers were together in like their own little tier. The Vikings and Chargers were in that little, also tier together. Now, Lions all the way to 49ers are almost in their own tiers. Why does it go from Lions to 49ers? Because those are all the teams I think are really, really, really solid, and they're missing one little aspect, or there's one thing hesitantly I'm holding back on. While the top 5 teams, I believe, are teams that are really good, with obviously some missteps along the way, but really overall solid teams. And we'll get to why those teams are like that. But the Bengals just they had a really rough beginning of the season. Now they got to recover that. And same with the Lions. Honestly, they've had a really good season, but they just have to win games that are important. Seahawks, kind of weird team. They haven't had any notable games or wins that I really thought of, and they just kind of gradually have grown into a top 10 team. And they won against the Browns this week, which was impressive. But, I mean, they're kind of in that fringe, are they almost imposter-like? And I think they just have to win consistently and have a standout game. That's simple and to the point. They're just being consistently good, which is good. I mean, you need to be consistently good, but also showcase some of your talent. Then we get the top 8 teams, and that's the Arizona Dolphins, the Miami Dolphins, which are the most controversial team, in my opinion. I think they're a great top 8 team, and I don't think you can put them in top 5 right now. Until they win one of these big notable games. I think the next one, they have a Bills game. I think they have a Chiefs game. They have Eagles game. They have some tough games ahead. Before I'm ever going to move them up into a really, really strong top 5, I need to see one of those big wins. Because they've only beaten bad teams. And Patriots are divisional rivals. Sure, whatever. And he beat them by a decent amount. You have to win games that are important. You can't make the playoffs. Or you can't win the Super Bowl by beating bad teams. You have to face the Kansas City Chiefs. You have to face a Dallas Cowboys. You have to face a San Francisco 49ers. And while I think the 49ers are falling, of course, I think the Dolphins have to showcase that they can beat some of these bigger teams. And they haven't yet. Simple to the point. And sure, the points they're putting up is very impressive. But honestly, maybe with the exception of the Jags, I could see any team above them beating them decently easy right now. Those teams, they have to get a win over one of those teams. Even then, I'd probably be okay with just seeing a nice, solid win over the Jags. I just need to see something like that. Even the Seahawks, Bengals would even be an impressive win for me. Just seeing these teams they don't feel like they would match up well against. And that's what my hesitancy is on it. And while the teams above them, 7 through 1, still play well, I can't see myself putting up the Dolphins anymore. They're still in line, but they're still not doing very great in that regard. Jaguars are kind of that middle ground mixed team where I think they have a lot of potential, and they won a really impressive game with the Bills. Sure, you can bring some outside factors into it, almost like the Lions with the Chiefs. But they're playing consistently good. They're not just playing awful football. Even in their losses, besides maybe the Texans one earlier this season, they're looking decently well, decently consistent. Trevor's looking really well. Their run game is doing really good. Their defense is holding up. Jags are just being a consistently good team, and sure, it hasn't been against the best teams, but they're facing off against above average teams, and they're at least having some notable wins and notable showcases. And I think it's really important for a top 10 team to do. Meanwhile, you got the 49ers who, 2 weeks ago even, you would ask me who my favorite was for the Super Bowl, it'd be the 49ers. Easily, they have had the biggest fall from grace. I don't know what happened. I really don't. Debo, I don't think was the biggest loss there. CMC, was hurt for a little bit, and you could say that maybe his productivity was down a little bit, but the 49ers have had a big fall from grace. Losing to the Bengals this week was a very big statement for the Bengals, but also really more of a big statement against the 49ers. Their secondary especially did not look good at all. Their secondary, which probably was the weakest point, was exploited and really used. They couldn't get anything really going in the rushing game. Receiving game was all right. George Kittle's still being utilized quite a bit. But they've shown a lot of vulnerability. When you lose 3 games in a row, you have now shown vulnerability where now I'm doubting you. If you said 2 losses, you're a top 3 team. I think so. Here's how my gradual fall from grace went. 1 loss, I still think you're a top team. 2 losses, I now think you're a fringe top 5 team-ish, the 3 to 4 range now. Because now I don't feel like you can compete with the big dogs, but you can still compete. Now you have this 3rd loss in a row, too. That I just think now you're a fringe top 5 team. And a fringe top 5 team is not what I really want to see from you. With Brock Purdy showing weakness now, CMC not running the best that we've seen him, and the receivers doing, just as well as they have to an extent, and their defense really struggling. We'll see how well they do. They did make a big trade for Chase Young, and that could help them a lot and bring them back in that top 5. But right now, I'm very doubtful of them, where they should be. And then we get the top 5 teams, which are just my Super Bowl favorites. They're the teams that I don't see many weaknesses on. And Bills are maybe the most fringe top 5 team I can state, but the Bills have still looked good consistently. They're 5-3. Honestly, I can't even remember all their losses. I'm going to actually look back real quick. I mean, they lost against divisional rival in the Patriots. Here, let's go through the schedule together. Bills, Jets. They lost to a divisional rival in the Jets. Beginning of the season, again, I'll put a little bit weight to it, but I'm not going to put a lot. But yes, they did struggle a lot. They beat the Raiders very well. They beat the Commanders pretty well, and they beat the snot out of Dolphins. And then they lost in a good game, both overall, to the Jags. Then they beat the Giants barely, and then they had a good game but lost to the Patriots in divisional rival matchup. And then they beat the Bucs but barely. You know, a lot of this is showing that there's a lot of good signs here and a lot of bad signs here for me. The Bills are showing inconsistency. Bills are also showing explosivity, and it's showing they can win or at least compete with good teams. Again, I'm counting Dolphins as a good team until otherwise told. And I think the Bucs are a decent team as well, and the Jags are a good team. And you know, it's a lot of mixed bags here, but we also know what the Bills are capable of. They haven't shown the fall from grace like the Bengals did. They just showed that maybe they had a down game and then really good game, then really good game, and sure against not great teams. They haven't had a statement game yet, but this next week will be a good challenge for them, Bills and Bengals. So we'll see in that regard how well Josh Allen and the Bills overall showcase. But I still have enough confidence in them that I'm going to keep them in top 5 until proven otherwise. And that kind of goes the same with the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys have gotten overhated based on how bad they've lost to the Cardinals and how bad they lost to the 49ers now, especially now with what we see. But the Cowboys kind of overhated. They're doing very well. They have a great roster, great coach, and I think they're starting to showcase they can win these big games. It's just that they have these down points that they need to learn from, and they're going to be a step-up team, and I think compete with almost any team, hands down, even the Eagles, which I think we will get to see. Then you got the Ravens, and the Ravens are the biggest team, kind of like the Seahawks. It kind of just blinked, and all of a sudden, like, oh, they're there? Wow. And I actually kind of want to go see where the Ravens are in terms of what games they've won, because they won some statement games. They're already high in the rankings already, but to start the season, but they destroyed the Texans. They beat the Bengals barely, but in a good game from both of them. Well, Bengals less so, but they were still fine. A close game with the Colts. They lost. It was a nasty game, not going to lie. They beat the snot out of the Browns. They barely lost to a divisional rival in the Steelers. They beat the Titans. They beat the snot out of the Lions, and then they beat the Cardinals barely. So they've had some very big statement wins against the Lions, especially was a good one, and the Browns was another good one. They're beating these mediocre teams in terms of like the upper echelon teams, top half teams almost. And then they, of course, had a statement win against the Bengals. And then, of course, they let a couple losses go, which is kind of showing some weakness. But they're also showing they can beat some of these teams and not just keep it like explosive done. I almost see beating a snot out of a team as not a great sign. You know what I mean? Like in terms of like a mediocre team. Like if you beat the Packers, 70-20. Sure, we'll go with that. I almost see that as a bad thing. Because I feel like that shows, unless your backups are in for the appropriate amount, I feel like this shows high high explosiveness, and explosiveness can go both ways. It can go against the team you're playing, but can also go against you eventually and backfire. And that's what I get worried about. But the Ravens have shown consistently just good. Now, granted, against the Lions, 38-6, I feel like what is pretty high, but it's not as high as it possibly could have been. I am going to say that's probably one of the more explosive games where they could backfire type thing next week, but it didn't. And as long as they show the consistency and show, gradual build, I think the Ravens can really, really low-key make the Super Bowl. They just have to overcome a couple big teams here. And then you got the Chiefs and the Eagles, and I think there's any explanation there. I think they both momentarily fell from grace, but now they're kind of back in the full form. I think they'll take some time and big snowball effects. The Eagles are 7-1. Chiefs did have a big loss against the Broncos, and I will say, I gave Broncos more credit than I gave the Chiefs discredit. Chiefs are Chiefs. I mean, there's one bad loss. I think the gap between the Ravens and Chiefs is now gone. I will say that, but I do think that the gap was there and exists enough for the Chiefs to kind of backpedal a little bit. But obviously, I still the Eagles as the number one team. I think the Eagles and Chiefs play again. I would put my money on the Eagles, and that's kind of how it goes for me. I see the Chiefs struggling, but they had so much momentum through the 6 games in a row they won that they lost to the Lions, now they lost to the Broncos. It's a big sandwich of loss and a bunch of wins. Don't see that really happening too much more for the Chiefs, and we'll see if they fall more, but right now I still feel pretty confident. And the Ravens, of course, I feel like is a nice little slick team. I feel like, honestly, what's the record exactly? With Lamar Jackson in full throttle, I think, especially with him putting up the stats he has, is doing really well. They're 6-2, and they've won some, again, decently hard games. I mean, they've let some games go, but 6-2 is probably the record I would have said if I knew this is how they're playing. This is probably the record I would give them at this point. And their division isn't easy. Steelers, Browns, and Bengals are all 4-3. So I would take that as you will. And that's kind of my power rankings, kind of my thought process behind it all. And again, I know it's easy for people to fall into the rhythm of saying, okay, well, the Bengals or who's the team, the 49ers really suck right now. Let's drop them all the way to 15 or something. You know, the teams above them won. It's really easy to get caught up in that. I think that maybe I'm being a little too easy in terms of the Giants and maybe I think the Giants are maybe doing too hard on the Texans. But I think that helps me keep more logic-minded head. I don't think I'm moving teams too volatile, I should say. And that makes me feel good about myself because I'm feeling more consistent about teams. Now, each week, I feel very confident in where these teams are. Sure, and it makes me feel a lot more logical because, yeah, Giants are falling, 100%. But for every Giants that fell, I've now got the Buccaneers. They're back at 14 where they first started. And I feel good about that. It just feels like they're gradually moving up and showcasing my confidence level in them. And the Giants, yes, are 20. But honestly, I still think they're playing, maybe with a couple weeks of exceptions, to a team that could play in the top 20. And that's simple to the point. Obviously, falling from 20 or from 8 is pretty big, but it's continuously keeping these teams in right-minded. I'm not getting biased. I'm not getting overhype against these teams like Texans. I think I got a little overhyped because they did have some good games of playing well, but I think they if they play well and the other team plays badly, they can win a lot of these games. And people forget that divisional games do kind of, are kind of tough for these teams. Texans beating the Jags, I mean, it's going to happen. I mean, just simple to the point. Obviously, there's a couple exceptions like the Denver Broncos 16 streak win or loss streak against the Chiefs, but upsets happen even in divisions, or especially in divisions, honestly. And you got to be more careful about that. And I think it's easy to fall into they're bottom 26 or top 26, for the Giants at number 26, or I've seen some at 30. I think people jump the gun too much after seeing even what we did last year with how well the Giants can do. And I think they just need a wake-up call, absolutely. But I think they're still a decent team. I still think, the Patriots still have a lot of potential as long as they unlock it. I think the Texans are maybe just a little bit more on the lower end side. They could do well, but again, they're too young for me to really feel confident about. Panthers, same case. I feel much more volatile with their team because their team has so much potential. We've seen the explosivity. We've seen Bryce Young and Adam Thielen connect really, really well consistently. While C.J. Stroud, has had Nico Collins and Tank Dell, and they've connected consistently, but their run game is non-existent. The Panthers' run game is also non-existent. Their defense is, getting there. Panthers' defense is getting there. But it just feels like with the Panthers, they feel more explosive. They can come out and play against great teams and see the points rack up. Even if it's not necessarily that close, they're putting up the points. And that's beside the point there. That's kind of my opinions, my power rankings, a little bit of my logic of what really goes into my power rankings when I make them every week. Obviously, I'll readjust after week 10 with or going into week 10 with the boys and kind of getting all that together. And then week 11 will then begin my gradual build back with the current adjustments make, and I'll probably change all the things they messed up. No, I'm kidding. But no, it'll be really interesting because now that can help me get the preseason mindset out of it. Those guys are very, very good about how the teams are competing this year. I'm very mixed about hey, these aren't completely different teams. I don't believe that at all. These are not completely different teams. They are slightly, I guess, but every season's new, but every season also is going in with new momentum. Obviously, with Chiefs, they came in with more momentum than anybody else because they won. Eagles second most, So you got to take that in mind and kind of move forward as that such thing should go. So, and how things should go is eventually these should line up to about what their standings are. Not completely, but about. And we'll see how it goes and turns out to be. Either way, I got a few minutes before Trayton's going to hop on, so I'm going to get to those and get to the predictions here soon. But either way, tune in for some videos. Currently still editing the big new series. I'm very excited about that, and we'll get rolling through it all. So anyway, see you guys later. StraightA Dawson, out.